Before we begin, I want to take a moment to remind you about the upcoming Moving Titan Retreat, October 2nd through the 4th in Tampa, Florida. This will be the only large-scale independent moving conference in North America this year, and you are not going to want to miss this opportunity to hear from 8- and 9-figure moving and home service entrepreneurs and experts while masterminding with up to 500 moving company owners. We're bringing back Tommy Mello, Sean Crane, and Reagan Weiss for 2.5 days, and this isn't going to be some motivational rah-rah event. We are specifically focusing on tactical strategies that you can immediately take home and start multiplying your business headed into the fall and winter. And make sure that you never have another slow winter and off season again. We'll have more networking opportunities, more vendors setting up displays, and a full day workshop on day 3 where you can work directly one-on-one with Tommy and the other speakers to dial in your business. There might even be some surprise guests and entertainment. But don't wait to lock in your tickets. Early bird tickets are the lowest they will ever be, and prices go up August 1st. Visit movingtitanretreats.com. That's movingtitanretreats.com, or check the link in the description and lock in your tickets before the prices go up or before we sell out, because we will sell out. I'll see you there. At Two College Brothers Moving, Storage, and Franchising, we are Team SmartMoving. This has been the CRM that we have used for the last 4 years, and it has grown right alongside with us. I love all the features, all the reporting tools, how easy it makes to schedule, book, sell, dispatch crews. It really is an intuitive software. It's really dialed in without the bugs and the glitches that we've experienced with other softwares in the past. So it still amazes me if a company is not using a CRM. I still find companies that are doing it the old-fashioned way with spreadsheets and calendars and notes and handwriting job orders, and you don't have to do that with SmartMoving. That's a bottleneck that's holding you back if that's you. So make the switch to SmartMoving, whether you're using a CRM or not. It truly is the smartest move you'll ever make, just like we tell our clients that we're the smartest move you'll ever make. So check out SmartMoving today and schedule your free demo. All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. I'm Wade Sweikel, and today's guest is somebody that I have recently had the privilege to connect with, who I originally saw on stage at one of Tommy Mello's Freedom events last fall. And today's guest is Dan Antonelli. He is the president of Kickcharge Creative, the world's premier branding agency for home service companies. He did Tommy Mello's brand. He's done hundreds of other brands, and he's also the best-selling author of the book Branded, Not Blanded. And we're super blessed that Dan is going to be speaking at the upcoming Moving Titan Retreat on how to brand your moving company or your small business, whatever brings you to the Moving Titan Retreat. He's an expert. He is the go-to guy. I'm really excited to talk to you here, Dan. We've already had a couple conversations about our brand and some places that we want to take it. But if you don't mind just giving a little backstory on Kickcharge Creative, how you came up with the name, and a little bit of your rise to become this world-renowned branding expert for home services.
Sure. Wade, thank you so much for having me here today. Super grateful for the opportunity. And yeah, I can't wait to speak at the event. It's going to be epic. I heard so many great things about the last years, and I'm just so proud to be a part of the new one coming up. I started Kickcharge, believe it or not, next year will be 30 years that the company's been in existence. We have 36 employees, 37 employees to date. And, my background originally, believe it or not, was actually in hand lettering. So when I was probably 15 years old, I was hand lettering trucks. I was doing signs and working primarily with small businesses, and a lot of them were home service businesses. So I did the first van I actually did in my parents' backyard was for a plumber, and I lettered their name on there. And I was always just super passionate about lettering, logos, truck lettering, things like that. And I really ultimately wanted to be a sign painter when I quote unquote grew up. But my parents thought it'd be maybe a better idea to actually go to college. And went to college and I studied advertising. So I got to kind of learn so much about the psychology of design while I was in college and then apply that to branding. And that was really the thing I was really most passionate about, was creating these logos and really trying to figure out the psychology behind branding. And I think that that's what has really made us very different than a lot of other companies out there. We're really so focused on what the viewer experiences when they see a brand and how they react to it, and how we can almost help control what a viewer feels about a company just by the visuals that are being presented. So, people, listen, I love creating beautiful brands and pretty truck wraps and all those other things that go along with it. But I'm really most interested in how that work translates into results and how that work really affects outcomes. And one of the most important outcomes you see it affect are things like booking rates, close rates, average tickets. All those things play such a huge role in how the brand shapes those outcomes. Is still really fascinating for me, and I continue to just really just dig deep into those data points to really try to make sure that when we're working on branding, we're really considering all those aspects.
What are some of the most common mistakes that you see home service companies making with building out their brands?
Probably the biggest mistake they make from day one is naming. So
Mm.
what they name their company quite often is a huge impediment to their growth. And there's not a ton of information about how to name your home service company. It was one of the reasons why I wanted to put as much as I could into the book. And naming is actually the biggest chapter in the book, because I think it's the most misunderstood, and it's the one people get wrong from day one, which just sucks because then you spend so much time trying to fix that problem and overcome that problem. So naming remains one of the biggest challenges. I think you see some traditional things where there's the notion that, if, like, for example, if you're a moving company, that you need to have a logo that looks like you're a moving company. And while that seems, well, yeah, of course you should. On the other hand, if your moving company logo looks the same as everyone else's logo that's in the same space, well, why would anyone ever remember it? And so we try to look at branding as we're building brands, and even as we're doing naming, is what would be something that would be sticky that would cause someone to remember your brand name. So if you're a moving company and you're named M&R Moving, I don't know why I would ever remember that. What would cause me to remember that particular brand name? And more importantly, how would I remember that brand name later on when I actually needed that service? So that's the part that branding is really trying to control, is how do you live in someone's mind and rent space in their mind so that when they are ready for service later on, they're like, oh, what was that company I saw? Because you'll win that game on Google every single time if they're typing in your name into Google. But if they're typing in moving company near me, now you're at the mercy of Google to pay for that lead and to really be sort of, you know, paying so much to have people remember who you are at that point. Whereas I would rather them know your name, type your name into Google, you're going to show up number one, presumably for that branded keyword search name. And that's typically what we're trying to recommend and advocate. So, especially in the moving industry as well, you've got this canvas. I mean, the canvas is just unparalleled, right? I mean, it's so much bigger than a traditional van that a home service company might use. You just see so few of them being maximized and really making the most of that opportunity and making the most of every single impression that's made in that community. So there's a lot of things that people don't do well in the beginning because, let's face it, like some people just bootstrap the whole thing, and that's not their world to understand branding. They probably understand moving pretty well, but branding is a whole other thing. So, I wrote the book to help people that are starting, or even people that are in business already, really understand how to leverage a brand, how it can maximize their marketing spend, how it can make them less dependent on Google. Like, all those things go along with it. Even average tickets is a huge piece of it, right? So, you think about when you buy sneakers, right? And you're going to buy Nikes. You expect to pay more for Nike sneakers. Well, why? Why do you think you should pay more for Nike sneakers? Or why do you think you should pay more for an iPhone or a Mac versus a PC? Well, because the perception is it's better. Well, why is the perception better? Well, I've sort of just been fed all this imagery, this notion that Nike is the best sneakers. So I'm not surprised when the pricing is this high. So the same psychology holds true as a home service provider. Why does Mrs. Jones believe she should pay more for your service versus your competitor? What are you doing to control that narrative? And branding is the foundation of, how you control that narrative. What do you look like when you show up? What does the truck looks like when you show up? Every time she communicates or interacts with your brand, what is the message that she's being fed? Does she think that this is a stand-up operation, that they're going to do the right thing for me when they move my home? Or, maybe they won't be in business next year. Like, all those images are communicating something to me on a subliminal level. All we're trying to do is control what she thinks at that point.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I see a lot of companies, they've just got like they'll take like a yellow Penske truck that they
Mhm.
bought used, and it's so obvious that they just bought this retired old used Penske or retired old used U-Haul truck, and they'll just put, John's Moving or whatever on the side of it. Yeah, I don't know if that company exists. Sorry, John, if it is. But and I'm just like, I see those driving down the street, and I think they think that they're standing out because it's bright yellow,
Mhm.
but it's like so obviously like a Penske truck, and
Yeah,
it
yeah,
just
yeah.
I'm like, and we've been there. Like I did the same thing early on. We bought a used Penske truck, and yellow is one of our colors, but it's that shade of yellow that it says Penske, just like Coca Cola has
Right,
that shade of
right.
red that they have
Yeah.
exclusively to themselves. So, it's definitely a big issue in our community. And there's not a lot of really well branded moving companies that I can think of, even the guys that have been around for 100 years. Are there any moving companies that you've seen? I know you've been all over the country that really stand out to you. And what are the elements that you see that look really good? Who's figured it out in the moving sector?
I mean, listen, it may sound like I'm, blowing smoke up your ass, but you're doing a good job. Like, you're doing so much better than most. But you have the national chains, which have done fairly well with how their branding lives on those, really, really long trailers and tractor trailers. They've done a pretty good job. But when you look at some of the non-franchise players in the space with the smaller movers, very few of them really have done it well. And I think that, again, when you think about what's the experience that Mrs. Jones have when she gets an estimate from a larger company like that versus a smaller company, what can we do from the smaller company to make them feel like or as confident in the decision to hire you versus the bigger company? So, you don't typically see it executed well. It reminds me a little bit of the almost the delivery space where we've done some branding for delivery companies, and we did a brand for a company in New York City called RDS Delivery, and we got them to look at the same level as FedEx. Like, you look at their fleet of vehicles driving down the road and the colors and how we integrated the messaging, and they look so professional right now compared to where they used to be, where it's just like a white van with, like, green letters and black. It was so boring. Like, I would never look at it a second time, and it would never also register to me as something to be memorable. So what I love about the space is I see almost the moving space very similar to where like Garage Door was, 3, 4 years ago. And even roofing never really embraced the notion of branding. It was always very generic, very plain stuff. Let's get a rooftop clip art logo and put it on the side of the van. So all I see within the moving space is just opportunity because there's so few companies that are actually well branded. Again, so if I can design something that makes that consumer believe that you're at a level similar to maybe a national chain, they're going to feel more comfortable and confident in actually paying a premium for that. Right. So that's the problem is, there are a lot of moving companies that perform a great service. Like, they're really good operators. I just can't get there by looking at their brand. I can't get there if I look at their website and I look at their truck and I look at the uniforms the guys are wearing. I'm not getting that. But wouldn't it be great if all those touch points measured up to how well they actually performed the service, right? So a lot of times for us, we work with a lot of companies that are really good operationally. They just look like shit from a brand perspective. So all I got to do is marry that up. All I got to do is make them look as good as they actually perform. And that's usually the recipe for a home run. That's how they get their booking rates up, they get their close rates up, their average tickets increase, like all those things that come along with it.
Yeah, and I've noticed too. There's like a couple different mindsets that a lot of the moving company owners that I talk to have. Like some of them are going for, that very simple look that looks like it, isn't super expensive service. They want to be like a budget mover. Some of them are going to go for like that muscular Hulk guy holding up a box over their head or a whole house over their head or whatever. Then you got some that try to go with like this classic, like affluent, wealthy look. But I noticed that a lot of your branding that I've seen in your book and on your website, it's fun, like it's playful. And ours, I feel like, is in that style too. We've got like a
Mhm.
cartoon of like two guys driving in a truck. And I think we could do some things to tighten up our brand too. But I've had, mixed reactions. Some people are like, oh, wow, I love that branding. And then some people are like, it's like a cartoon, like, it looks a little juvenile and.
Mhm.
Most of you have heard me talk about Moversville and the power of their email marketing service that has helped us increase leads by over 112% over the last year. But have you heard of Moversville Connect? Moversville Connect is an incredible resource for all things moving. They feature an array of vendors and services and lists like insurance providers, softwares, equipment suppliers, marketing sources, and much, much more. The best part? This resource is free. Go check out Moversville Connect today by going to moversville.com and clicking Connect. That's moversville.com and click Connect and discover the world of Moversville beyond email. One of the worst parts about owning a moving company has to be finding quality movers and drivers. Trying to run all the job ads takes up time, and then you schedule guys to come in for interviews and they never show up. It's a massive headache. Well, let me tell you about a good friend of mine named Winston who runs a company called Move Up Consulting. Move Up specializes in hiring and recruiting for the moving and storage industry, and they do all the lead generation for mover and driver candidates. They have a fully built hiring CRM, plus you get a dedicated account manager who phone interviews and screens all of your candidates. Once they find qualified candidates, they schedule in-person interviews for you and your management team so you can make great hires. They even handle all the appointment confirmations. It's that simple. To start building a better moving team today, visit moveupconsulting.com and tell them Wade sent you. Want to know what the silver bullet for growing your business is? USA Home Listings. USA Home Listings has a myriad of marketing services that are essential to every single moving company. It blows my mind when I have conversations with people who reach out looking for help, trying to get leads, trying to get the phone to ring, that aren't doing mailers and aren't subscribed to USA Home Listings. The data there is so invaluable, and it's not just home listing data, even though that's an awesome, super easy, super intuitive feature that they provide where you can filter out all the homes that recently went under contract or got listed in your neighborhood, and a new coming soon feature before it even hits the MLS that you can filter out through zip codes, towns, cities, counties, prices. But that's just one small feature that they do. They also have turnkey mailing services. They'll help you design your postcard, a postcard that actually gets results. If you've tried mailers in the past and it didn't work, it's probably because you didn't have the right elements on your postcard. And they also have a social media division. So check out usahomelistings.com. It's an essential addition to all of your marketing needs before you do any other marketing. Check out usahomelistings.com. As we're all competing for the same client, which is typically that affluent homeowner with 3-4 bedroom or more home that, you know, can buy the $10,000 move and not, have to stretch the wallet too much to be able to afford that premium service for the full pack, moving from a very large house to another large house, ideally far away. What style? I mean, I think I have an idea where you're going to go here, but like, tell me about each of those like styles and those different philosophies that you see a lot of people in our space shooting for, whether it's like the classic look, the simple look, the elegant, the fun cartoon type,
Yeah, yeah.
mascot look. Like tell me a little bit about, each one and what your thoughts are there.
Well, first off, you really need to remember who you're selling to. So sometimes owners are like, well, mascots are too fun, mascots are too silly. We're a serious company, and they really are forgetting who the brand is actually designed for, right? So what they personally may like or not like is not really as relevant as what Mrs. Jones likes and how the brand actually speaks to the fears that she has as a homeowner. So you look at anything in the home service space, roofing may have almost a more negative reputation than HVAC or plumbing, but all of them are afraid of who's coming to their home, no matter what. 100%. Right? So what do we do to make her feel at ease with the people who are ultimately going to be rummaging through her entire set of possessions, right? She's worried about who's going through her stuff. She's worried about who's coming to her home. And that's no different whether it's a plumber or whether it's a moving company. It's the same thing. You're coming to my home, you're going to be going through my stuff, and I want to make sure I feel like I can trust you, that I'm in really good hands, and that you're going to do the right thing. So we do a lot of different styles. We do clean and corporate, we do modern, we do mascot. It really depends on a number of criteria. Sometimes it depends on even what the market looks like and who you're competing against on a typical basis. If you're in a market where your top five competitors are all using fun mascots, well, I'm not going to be the sixth. I'm going to have a completely different strategy that I think is going to be more disruptive and more unique in your particular market. And you have to, even when you think about mascot branding too, you have to be careful with that too, because the idea of the big, strong, muscled man, right, as the visual, you need to make sure if you're going to go in that direction that again he looks friendly, because I don't want the big, strong, muscled man coming to my home because now I'm intimidated by that also, right? So you have to balance that and make sure if you're going to do something like that, that he is friendly or he appears friendly, looks competent, looks trustworthy. Like those are all the aspects of, how you're making her feel at ease. So mascots are not the right answer for every single instance. There's a ton of mascot branding that's being done that's really, really so poorly executed that it runs contrary to everything that you're actually trying to accomplish with it. So again, when you see some of these mascots that are being done, they're not illustrated properly, they're not drawn professionally. Now you're actually doing yourself more harm because they look amateurish, they look unprofessional. And then you're, as the homeowner, again, you're saying to yourself, well, yeah, that doesn't look professional. That doesn't look, reputable, because the nature of the actual illustration is so amateurish that it's again feeding that notion of unprofessionalism. So while there are a lot of mascots being used in branding, the vast majority are not executed well and actually are running contrary to what's actually in that company's best interest, because it's further signifying that they are not professional. So you can have a very professional brand that's done with a mascot. It just has to be executed properly for sure. But I get that. And sometimes the naming also is going to dictate the approach. If it's something that's done with a fun name, why would I have a really serious symbol or mark to go with it? Like that doesn't make any sense. So the naming is going to sometimes drive the creative. I mean, obviously that sounds painfully obvious probably, but a lot of times that's going to dictate what approach makes the most sense for you.
Makes total sense. And now, one of the things that we've been facing, we do primarily residential moves. We'll do local long distance. We're going for the bigger ticket houses. We provide the premium service with the premium pricing. But one of the things what we're looking at trying to get more into is the commercial side. So, our moving season typically is going on right now. It runs through like May to the beginning of September. And in the off season, we still stay steady, we still get moves, but I've always thought that adding that commercial work in the off season could help take away some of the seasonability and allow us to kind of, maintain more of a flat line trajectory rather than this bell curve that we tend to see every year. But how does branding differ when you're going after a commercial client like the corporate office or the, whoever in whatever, yeah, mainly big office buildings and things like that versus residential? Because I feel like our brand resonates pretty well with our residential base, but we have struggled a little bit to get the commercial side to take us seriously. I mean, we've built a reputation here, so we still do get that work, but what are we missing to tap into the commercial business that's out there from a brand
Yeah,
standpoint?
in situations like that where there are two distinct audiences, right? Mrs. Jones is very different than the facility manager that owns the building or is the person in the company that's responsible for the moving. Somewhat different audiences there. So in cases like that, sometimes you want to look at a blended approach where you have a brand that speaks to both audiences. So you typically don't want to go super hard into fun, playful, silly name type of approach because the facility manager or the corporate purchaser may say, like, they don't seem as professional, or they don't seem like that this is something that they have a lot of experience in. And it'll speak more to a residential business itself. I mean, a residential customer. So you can really do a brand that can bridge both. There's ways to do it. Like we do it all the time when we have a commercial and residential HVAC contractor. Like I don't want to go full hardcore on something with a mascot if I know that 50% of their business is commercial. Now, that being said, sometimes you find that on the commercial side, the mechanism for you to get that work is a little bit different than the mechanism to get the residential work, meaning that a lot of commercial work, especially in the HVAC side, is relationship built, meaning it's not like the facility manager is going online and saying air conditioning repair near me. It's somebody that they've known for a little while or they've been doing business with. Maybe it's bid oriented, meaning, it's something that the companies are actually bidding on to get that commercial work. And so in some of those instances, you can make the argument that they don't necessarily care as much about what the brand looks like because of those other criteria. But you could definitely do a brand that can speak to both. I think you always want to balance it, right? So if it's 10% of your business, however, like if you're saying like we would like to do more commercial, what's the goal? Like what is the ideal sweet spot for your business? Is it 90% residential and 10% commercial? If so, I'm still going to lean the brand to appeal more to residential than I am to commercial because I'm not going to sort of jeopardize the upside of a brand that speaks more to residential for just 10% of the commercial side.
Makes sense. I've seen companies. I'm thinking of one up in Gainesville. I think it's a air conditioning company. I guess the fact that I'm not even really sure what they do might say a lot about their brand. But I think it was called like Computech AC or something, and that was like their residential, and they tried to get into commercial, and they basically opened a commercial division called CT Mechanical.
Mhm.
So whatever the first name was, Computech or something like
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
and they went to CT Mechanical, and we've toyed around with that idea. Our LLC here in Tampa is Smarter Moving Solutions LLC, and we played with that as like maybe that's the more commercial name that we operate under with similar branding elements to know that they're tied together. Or we've talked about like 2CB commercial, just because I have that other company in my head that kind of did the abbreviation. Do you ever recommend your clients kind of have two of separate brands, but that kind of tie in together to try to hit both of those clientele?
Yeah, we've done a couple of things like that for companies that are split like that, where you take one consistent brand element for the commercial as well as the residential. So no matter what, maybe it uses these same two primary brand colors and maybe the same mark. And then there's something about the colors that change depending on what division it is. So you could definitely do something like that. Like I think the name that you're speaking about as far as smarter moving, like that feels like that name would bridge well for both residential and commercial. Because if I'm a residential, well, I do want the smartest people handling my move. And if I'm commercial, I could say the same thing. So sometimes you look at the naming and see if the naming can span and if it makes sense for the naming to span both audiences. But if not, there's ways that visually you can almost set them up to be divisions. And then optically, you can see that one is slightly different than the other. The challenge when you go with two separate companies is then, and two separate names is now you're two separate marketing. You got
Yeah.
to do two websites, two uniforms, two different truck routes. You know what I mean? So it starts becoming a more expensive proposition to go in that direction. So typically, it's better if there's a way that they can all live under the same. It'll just make your marketing spend go a lot further.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. And I know exactly what you mean because when I actually bought two college brothers over 10 years ago now, and I thought about running the Smarter Moving Solutions as like the residential, commercial, and two college brothers for the college students. And then to your point, it was exactly that. We had to get two sets of uniforms, two different trucks, two different websites, two different everything. And it just started to get all convoluted. And then we didn't have a consistent brand at all because we had guys wearing one company's shirts
Right, right.
on the other one's jobs and mix and match. In case you haven't already heard about it, I want to tell you about the latest project that I've been working on called Tighten Up Training. And it's not just me, it's three other world class moving company owners from around North America that have pooled together our resources, our time, and our knowledge to bring you the number one training program for moving companies in the world. We've got over 200 videos on mover training, sales, culture, leadership, and we're continuing to add more and more to streamline training. We gamify the process in short little videos that are easy for your team to follow, and they're quizzed on retention. Rather than spend hundreds of thousands of dollars of your own money and months of your time tying up resources away from your own moving company, we're bringing you Tighten Up training for less than the cost of one damage claim a month, or less than the cost of booking one extra move per month. You book one extra move, it pays for itself. You save the time to have to take away time from your day or pay somebody to train new employees and to onboard new employees, it pays for itself. You avoid one damage claim or book one extra move a month, you got it. It pays for itself. It's so affordable. And we put so much time, money, and resources into this to build out something that our companies can use every day so that we can tighten up this summer and reduce claims. Since our company has gone on here, we're booking more jobs than ever, and we're reducing more claims than we've ever had. And we are teed up to have the best summer ever. So check out Tighten Up Training. Schedule a free 30-minute demo today by going to tightenuptraining.com. It was a little messy, and I decided to just embrace two college brothers. It was the story how we started, back in Gainesville in college at University of Florida. And we tried to build it around the story, and we made little tweaks over time to try to make it more resonate more with our ideal clientele. And you and I have talked, about the possibility of rebranding or refreshing a brand. When is it time for a company to either rebrand or refresh their brand?
So, I mean, the best answer is when the brand no longer represents who you are today and what you've evolved into. You asked earlier about Kickcharge and when Kickcharge was named or how that came about. I mean, Kickcharge was not our original name. In 2017, I renamed the company Kickcharge. It used to be called Graphic Designs. It was Graphic D dash Signs because originally I was doing graphic design work and I was doing sign work. So I thought, oh, that's super clever. And then years later, I hated the name. It's such a pain in the ass to spell it out every time to people. And I'm like, we're not even a graphic design company. Like, why we call this? This makes no sense. But I was like, oh, but we're doing okay. So I had the same mindset sometimes that I tell our clients that they shouldn't have the same mindset. Oh, dude, so you're not going to change your logo because you're successful now? Like, is that the reason? Or don't you always say success in spite of a poor brand is not a reason to perpetuate it, which is the other thing we say. So I had to go through it myself and say, you know what? This isn't who we are today. Like, we don't even do this anymore. Like, why are we still called this? And not only that, it didn't represent the energy that we bring to the table and what we do for businesses. Like, we basically power businesses, we supercharge their marketing. Like, we have all these things that we do that were not evident in our name, right? So Kickcharge came about because I knew it didn't represent who we had become at that point. And it took longer than it should have, honestly, to get to that point. But, we wouldn't be where we are today if I hadn't changed the name in 2017, like 100%. And sometimes, listen, you start a moving company, you do the best you can when you start. Like, you don't have a budget to hire a branding agency and get it done the right way from the beginning. So you're bootstrapping it. Maybe the rap guy says he can do it, he does something. In a lot of instances, you just don't know what you don't know. So, sometimes just having another person look at the brand and, assess some of the fundamentals on it, even some basic fundamentals. Like when you look at truck wraps, and so many of them are just completely illegible, break so many fundamental graphic design rules, things like that. Like, I don't expect a moving company to know those fundamentals, but I think you have to really look and say, is this who we are today? Or and does it represent the level of service that we provided? If you can't answer yes to that, then maybe it's time to actually take a look at the brand and give some consideration to maybe updating it. And the workshop that we're doing at the event is actually an interactive workshop where we have 10 different criteria that people are going to self-assess their own brand, right? So I'm going to explain these different criteria, and basically the people in the workshop are going to look at their own brands, look at their truck wraps, and grade themselves on a scale of 1 to 10 on all these different criteria. And then I'm going to give you some indication right then and there as to whether or not your brand actually is doing as well as it could be. But listen, I understand. A lot of people don't know, but like you wanted visual examples, like go to our website on kickcharge.com and go to the before and after section. And literally you can scroll over the old one and look at the new one. And suddenly you'll see, oh my God, yeah, I can see how much more effective this is. I can see why this is more sticky, why this is more memorable. And that's all, again, just the things that I don't really expect owners to necessarily understand, but the book will actually explain a ton of that as well. So sorry, that was a long answer, but the short answer, yeah, if it doesn't represent who you are today, maybe it's something to take a hard look at.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, what do you say to companies that say they've been in business for 10, 20 years, maybe longer, maybe they've been in business for 50 or 100 years, and they've always run under the same name and the same brand. And, they might say, well, we've lasted this long, business is good. We've been making money. Why would we take a risk of rebranding and losing all of this goodwill that we've built in our community? Or maybe you have multiple locations and it gets even more complicated. What are some of the risks to rebranding not only your image but your name? And then how do you help companies overcome some of those risks to do it the right way if they decide to take that leap into the unknown? Because to me it's a scary thought. We've
Oh
built
yeah.
built this
It-
location. We built three locations now. I mean, five if you count our satellite offices. And we've got a lot of web domain authority, and we've got a lot of customers that we've serviced that give us repeat and referral business. Like, how do we mitigate the risk of rebranding? I mean, what are the risks and what do we do?
sure. And listen, you absolutely should be scared about rebranding. 100%. Because done incorrectly, it can be devastating. And that's why it's so important to make sure you're working with people that have done this and understand that. You're speaking about a couple different things. First off, rebranding an existing company where we're not going to change the name. We're just going to keep the same name, but we're going to change visually what is being represented. Definitely far less risk involved in that. Okay. You want to look at, are there any tangible assets or equity in the existing brand that I might leverage in a rebrand? So, for example, you say to me, Dan, we're going to rebrand Two College Brothers. What are we going to do with it? Well, I'm probably not going to abandon purple and yellow because that has become uniquely associated with your brand. They're probably, I don't know of any other moving company that has purple and yellow as their brand. So it would be a really bad idea to suddenly say, you know what, you should be apple green and blue, right? That wouldn't make any sense. So you want to look at what things are existing that I leverage to bring into a rebrand. Maybe you had a mascot. Maybe the mascot was drawn poorly, but the idea of the mascot was actually good. So maybe I take an element of what that mascot used to be and I evolve him into something that's more professional, that's better, that's more memorable, things like that. So you always want to look at the equity. You also can use benchmarks about even revenue. And revenue is important when you consider name changes, right? Because if you're a 1 million and under moving company, then there's far less risk to a name change than if you're a $15 million moving company. So we use that as one of the benchmarks. Okay. How many years have you been using the name? If you're a 40-year or a 30-year company using the same exact name, I'm not sure I'm really, jazzed about the idea of changing your name, unless it's really bad. And you also look and you say, well, how much are they spending on marketing? Right? So if you're spending like 10, 15% on marketing, that signifies that there's something fundamentally wrong in what you're actually doing. And maybe the branding is actually the problem. Like I spoke to a guy yesterday spending 22%. And I said, dude, you're spending 22%. You know why you're spending 22%? Because your brand sucks. That's why you spend it 20 and your name sucks too. Right. So, you have to have these conversations with them. But, we will actually name about 75 home service companies, rename them from existing companies. We have never had them go backwards afterwards. Sometimes it's a short blip that you see after, but if you roll it out properly, that short term hit is always going to pay off long term, right? So anyone that we've renamed it's never not worked, knock on wood, it's been good. but you have to really be very careful. We don't just, randomly suggest that. It's a very deliberate decision, and you have to talk about the pros and cons. To your point earlier, like you said, well, what about SEO? What about the domain authority? What's going to happen to my old site when I launch this new site? All those things have to be very well strategized. You've got to work with your digital marketing company. You've got to figure out the strategy of launching the new brand. You have to keep the old site up for a little while so we don't suddenly turn off all our leads that were being generated from the old site. But we have to let the people coming to the old site know, hey, you know what? There's been a name change. This is our new site. You can hop over to our new website. How do we let everyone that was a former customer know that our name changed? It's got to be a mechanism for that to transpire, because we don't want them to think we went out of business. We want them to know, hey, this, M&R Moving is now Two College Brothers. And here's why that name change happened. So there is a very deliberate mechanism for doing a name change, but it's not something to be ever entered into lightly. And you really, really need to consider a lot of different criteria before that's recommended. We certainly, when we see initial based brand names, like, I keep saying M&R Moving. Hopefully there's not an M&R Moving, but last name based brands, if it was Antonelli Moving, those are things that typically do not work nearly as well as a name like Two College Brothers, because I can't assign a visual with M&R or Antonelli that as soon as I see that visual, I go, oh my God, that's Antonelli or that's M&R. But Two College Brothers, I could close my eyes. I don't know exactly what the logo looks like, but I have an idea of what elements should be in that logo. So the visuals aid in making something more sticky. So if it's a name that can't be sticky, that just usually means you're spending more money on Google. You're spending more money to have people actually, look up your name, or have your name show up on a random generic unbranded keyword search. So definitely something that's really, really very important to really weigh all the pros and cons of that. And it's not something that ever you should ever enter in lightly, for sure.
Yeah, I'm curious, poke holes at our brand. I'm like, we've got our name, we've talked a few times now. You've seen our trucks, you've seen our logo.
Mhm.
We've talked about the possibility of a refresh or a rename, but we want to keep it associated somehow to be able to not lose that goodwill that we've built and are continuing to build. I mean, we've been in business for 14 years now. So I'm just curious though, your thoughts as an expert, from the outside looking in. Obviously, it's close to me, it's close to our team.
Mhm.
But what elements do you like and what elements do you think could be done better?
Yeah, I mean, I like the name. I think the name is memorable. I think the name is sticky. I think if we were tackling this, we'd probably have a different approach to how we emphasize the fact that it's two college brothers. So I feel like, you know, visually, I almost feel like there should be two people there. Like, I feel like it should be the two guys. Maybe they're high fiving each other. Maybe they're doing something like that. So in my mind, and I know you have a mascot that's part of some of your branding, so you're kind of addressing it that. But looking behind you at the logo on the wall, it's like, you're focused on the college aspect, not so much the aspect of the two, which is the more unique aspect of the actual brand name. I mean, it works together, but I would probably say that we would look to maybe integrate, um, you know, these two guys, they're high-fiving each other, or they're doing something that signifies more so what the name actually is, and not necessarily as much about the college aspect. More it's about the two guys that are coming together to, this team that they created to get the job done, that kind of thing. So I would go in that way. And I think optically, I love the purple and yellow because it's unique, it's ownable. You think about if your company was red and black or green and black, it's like so boring. It's like, no way to own those colors, right? So I love the fact that you have very unique and ownable brand colors. Optically, I would flip a bit, and we talked a little bit about this, like on the truck wrap. So your truck wraps are primarily purple backgrounds, but you have purple lettering, and then you have outlines on all those letters. We would just flip that, so you don't need outlines on your lettering. It would actually make the lettering more visible and legible from a distance. Those are just mechanical things about it. And I think also optically, I would probably want to treat the number two in a way that perhaps is more dominant part of the actual brand. Instead of treating it equally, I think there's an element of that number two that I would probably want to do slightly different, just to sort of highlight the fact that it's two instead of reading straight across like that.
I like it. And I know we talked about an owl mascot or two owl mascots. Maybe they could be the brothers and it would take away a little bit from that collegiate feel and make it more of like Wise and
Yeah.
Guardian. I think that was some things that we discussed. So no, that's helpful. I appreciate that. I've gone back and forth over the years and I keep coming back to this quote that I heard one time that brands don't build companies, companies build brands. Tell me your thoughts on a quote like that.
Brands don't build companies, companies build brands. Yeah, to a certain extent, but I think the best brands that we've done have laid the foundation for an amazing culture. I think about the brand that we created for a company in upstate New York called Grasshopper. It's run by a woman named Amanda Triolo. And this company, when we renamed them, and this is an example of renaming, they used to be called PMK Mechanical, P something like that, right?
Can't even
Historically,
remember.
right? Again, I
Yeah.
can't remember it because it was an initial base brand. PMA, sorry, it's PMA Mechanical, and they were doing 100,000 in revenue for residential, and they were doing maybe I think 500,000 for commercial. And she had a pivot after COVID and wanted to go full residential. And she said, "I want you to rebrand me, and I want the company name to be PMA Mechanical." And I said, "Listen, I'm not going to take money from you to do a brand for PMA Mechanical because it's never going to get you to where you say you want to go." So I declined, and she was like a little pissed off at me when I said I wouldn't do it. And that's honestly that's just really the way I am with stuff. I will never take money for something I don't believe in. I will never take money for something that I don't think is going to turn the needle for you. So I said no. And then a month later, she says, "Okay, I'm ready. I'm going to let you change the name of the company." So we changed the name of the company to Grasshopper. And the reason why that's significant is grasshoppers can only move forward. Grasshoppers cannot physically move backwards. And that notion of always moving forward became the foundation of their entire culture. So their tagline is forward is a way of life. And you think about that tagline not only speaks to internal audiences, meaning the people who work for Grasshopper. So we as a company will only be moving forward. We are going to do everything in our power to empower you to grow as a person, to move your life forward. And from a customer perspective, again, we are going to improve your life. We're going to provide a service to your home that will move you forward. And so that would never have been possible if that company name remained PMA Mechanical. And you could watch their YouTube channel and see some of the videos and some of the events. They are 3 years into that rebrand, and they've gone from 100,000 to 20 million in revenue. So 20 million in revenue in 3 years after the rebrand.
Wow.
Incredible. She is one of the most amazing operators in the space that I've ever seen and worked with. And I've worked with several thousand home service operators, and she's just incredible what she's built. But more important, again, the culture that she's built. So, the company build that brand, or did the brand build that company? I feel like it's a little bit of both, but I know for sure that there's no way they get to where they are had they not rebranded and not, embraced that notion of what that grasshopper meant to them as a company.
Oh, I love that answer. You nailed it. I know it kind of put you on the spot there, but that was perfect. Are you familiar with Dan Kennedy or
Mhm.
Joe Polish?
Yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
spoke at the event. I found Dan Kennedy through actually Joe Polish's podcast, I Love Marketing. And he's really big on putting like a hotline number on the side of your truck that says call for a free report for how to clean your carpets or whatever, back when he did his carpet cleaning stuff. And Dan Kennedy, he speaks a lot about those kind of call to actions that guide customers down a funnel. And I've seen a lot of different creative things like that. Now it's like you scan this QR code and get 10 tips to, not get ripped off by movers or whatever.
Mhm.
And, we played around with some of those things. I don't know if we did it completely the right way, but like Joe talks about like putting those on the side of the van, these carpet cleaning vans. I've seen other companies do things where they put like a funny catchphrase, like, things that suck less than moving, number 64, like your mom's boyfriend or something like that. And so I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on like those types of things that like either are are memorable and like a different one for every truck. Like U-Haul does it. U-Haul puts
Yeah.
all the little facts on the sides of their truck, but then they also have like the consistent U-Haul iconic brand, and then or like the call to action that like gets a customer interest peaked and then down the funnel. Do you ever do anything like that, or do you have any thoughts on that strategy when it comes to kind of incorporating those elements into your brand?
We typically don't look at vehicle wraps as direct response. So, my hope with the vehicle wrap is not that I expect you to take immediate action upon viewing it. In fact, I think there's a stat out there that it's 95% of everyone that sees an outdoor advertisement, whether it's a truck wrap, a billboard, only 5% of them are actually in the market for your particular service at that very given moment. So, to me, I'm more thinking about again the notion of living in their minds. How do I become sticky? Now, some of what you just said, as far as a catchy tagline or a visual that is compelling or memorable, those are all things that certainly 100% I want to do. Like, I want to think about a tagline that when you say the tagline, it's something that's sticky. So I think about a brand that we created for Bueller Air Conditioning in Jacksonville, Florida. And the tagline is "Stay cooler with Bueller." Right now, I can
Like
I can kind of remember that because I certainly have a memory of the movie Ferris Bueller's, right. But now it's "Stay Cool with Bueller," and the visual is this big head of a mascot with sunglasses on. So I'm connecting the visuals with the tagline and what they do, which is air conditioning, right? So some of that I think works really well, but I tend to not be huge fans of QR codes on moving vehicles because again, I just don't think that it's necessarily the medium for which I'm expecting a direct response. Also, I just tend to think if it's well branded, I don't necessarily need the QR code to arrive at their website because I'm just going to use Siri or Google their name and I'm going to get there anyway. Right. So I don't typically, I tried several times while my wife was driving to scan a QR code while the other vehicle was moving. And it's really not that easy to do. Like, so, maybe when it's parked, you could argue, okay, well, they just can scan it while they're parked. But I tend to think that if it's branded well, it's not something that I think I need to put on there. Of course, is there real estate and there's a place to put it that's not impeding on my brand? I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but I just don't necessarily think that it's a medium that is considered to be direct response. Other things like I think online, like, hey, top 10 things we look for when hiring a moving company, and then you get them in the funnel that way, like 100%. Like, I think that that's absolutely the way to go. I just tend to think of billboards and trucks as being brand building rather than direct response.
Makes total sense. And I see this debate a lot in like the moving company owner Facebook groups. When people are getting a new truck wrapped or a new design or whatever done, there's a debate between emails and phone numbers on the trucks. Where do you
Mhm.
stand on that?
So,
And not
well,
not just emails,
definitely not
websites.
email,
I
like
meant websites. Sorry.
website. Okay.
Usually not an email on a truck. I guess there could be,
So
but
I, I would say at this point, you know, a moving truck is going to have the real estate to put both. When we're doing service vans for home service contractors, I would say at this point, 50% of the brands and truck wraps that we create do not have a phone number. Again, think about you personally and the last time you personally actually dialed a phone using digits,
well,
meaning
I
you
I
typed
I
in the numbers.
I did once. There's a plumbing company in our area that just says 1-800-POOP on the side of it.
Okay.
And that one I actually did. I snapped a photo of it and I called them and they fixed the toilet one time.
Yeah. But most people are gonna just Google the name of the company and get
True.
the phone number that way.
Yeah.
So if I have real estate, it's the same thing. If I have real estate that's not impeding on the brand, I don't have a problem putting a phone number on it, but I am definitely going to give higher priority to the website address than I am the phone number because it's not like I literally do not remember the last time I physically typed in 10 random digits on my phone. Like there's almost no chance of me to remember that in a mobile environment or driving unless it's a vanity number like 1-800-poop or whatever it was. Um, but it would be much easier for me to remember their brand name if it was memorable. So it's not, again, is it direct response? Am I expecting someone to take immediate action upon viewing that truck? Or is it something I'm hoping that will live in their mind later on when they truly actually need the service?
Gotcha. Makes sense. And I think, that specific example is a vanity number. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
1-800 flowers, 1-800 got junk. Like they built their entire company around a vanity number. So that, that is their brand, I guess. So that makes total sense. We advertise on a local radio morning show, and I had a conversation with the host about reading out our phone number. He's like, no, like, don't, I'm not going to read out the phone number. Everybody's driving to work when they're listening to me. I'll
Yeah.
give the website and your name several times, but they're not going to remember 813-922-1528 like if, when they're driving. So I agree with that. And what about QR codes? I mean, you mentioned that you tried to scan one recently, but you go to a stoplight, you go to a gas station, and you see a
Mhm.
truck parked there. I mean, is or even in your neighbor's driveway or something. Everybody has a phone and a camera in their pocket now. They can
Yep.
at least take a picture of the truck and maybe jump on the QR code for something. Are you for or against QR codes at all?
We're not big fans on QR codes. Again, I sort of make the argument: the weaker the brand, the bigger the QR code.
Uh,
Um, it shouldn't really be necessary. Um, And yeah, I say the same thing about phone numbers too. Like the weaker the brand, the bigger the phone number. But if it doesn't impede on the brand itself, is it the end of the world to have a QR code on it? Not necessarily, but sometimes optically it really throws off what I'm trying to personify and project, and it clutters the layout. And I don't necessarily think it's necessary for most people to figure out how to actually contact that company if they really want to. You know,
Makes sense.
it's going to be a well branded name. It's super easy to go on Google and just type in that name. Is it easier to use your phone and click on it? Maybe, but I don't think we missed the lead because we don't have a QR code.
Gotcha. Makes total sense. Have I don't know if you've heard of a book called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, but
Yeah,
he talks about like putting pictures of your ideal avatar, achieving their ideal result in your marketing. Not necessarily trucks, just generally like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
different pieces of it could be your website, could be your truck, could be a billboard. How do you feel about real pictures on on branding or marketing?
Sure. I mean, listen, we love real pictures. Like when we make ads, when we produce brochures, when I have branded photography from a client that has invested in having like a professional photographer take pictures, showing them in uniform in front of the home, showing them with the customer, showing them with the vehicle, reinforcing that brand experience. 100% so much better. Like the worst thing you can be doing and using in your marketing is stock photography. Absolutely makes everything feel so less authentic. So 100% agree with that. And I think a lot of what he talks about in that book too revolves around the notion of what exactly is the story of your brand. And I think most companies would have a very difficult time communicating that. Well, we're a moving company. Okay, well, beyond that, what is it that we are trying to do? What is our mission? When we look at, even our mission here and what we communicate as far as what our key motivating factor is we're here to change lives. Like we're here to change the lives of people, and that's ultimately the number one thing about what we do. We provide branding services, but our mission is to change the lives of as many home service companies as we possibly can. That's our mission. So I think people sometimes have a very difficult time really expanding upon that, and also having the branding embrace that, and some of the messaging, like, what is the legitimate voice of your moving company? Is it fun? Is it authoritative? Is it snarky? Like, what is it? And I think most companies would have a very difficult time actually explaining that to other people. And so when you can't do that, then again, you just become more generic. You just become same as everyone else. And the consumer doesn't really understand the differences about the experience of using you versus someone else. But what if your website crafted the story about just what you said, that experience? What is it going to be like after having two college brothers move your home? And you paint that picture and you talk about what's different, and you talk about how the team you've assembled is on a mission to be the best moving company in the world and to make the experience so easy for you, because we know how stressful moving is. That's our business. But we started this company because we want to create a situation and an experience that is unlike any other moving company you've ever worked with. And like,
Hmm.
so now you're painting a much different visual. Hey, we're going to show up and we're going to, wrap your stuff, and, we're going to use blankets, and well, everybody's going to be using blankets. Everybody's going to be doing almost similar things in a sense. But what's the story you can paint about how the experience is going to be different? That's really ultimately where the consumer believes there is a difference. Even though maybe the actual deliverable is the same, the experience of how it's described and the experience of what's actually going to be done can help and go a long way. But like I said, yeah, it's a great book to read. I think most people just don't really have an understanding of that component of it, or even what their brand story elements are.
Yeah, perception is reality. And if you can get people to perceive that they're going to have a good experience, then they're going to be anticipating a good experience, and
Right.
they're going to manifest that
Right.
ideally.
Yeah.
Early on, we tried to brand like everything in our company like to some kind of collegiate theme. Like it was like reverse engineering the perfect moving experience, or we had like you would start off as like a walk on when you worked for us, and then you'd move into like a second string, first string. We kind of got away from that, and we started going more towards just like what you were saying, painting that picture. Our missions to create a 5-star raving fan on every move.
Hmm.
Doesn't necessarily have anything to do with like a collegiate theme, like, some of the other slogans we came up with. We also do have the smartest move you'll ever make as a
Hmm.
trademark slogan too.
Which is
Um,
genius, by the way.
well, thank you.
That's an amazing tagline because that speaks to the promise, right? It speaks to what I hope to get and what makes you different, right? So that's why we said it, and the visual to connect that tagline also I think would be even more powerful, right? To really hammer home the idea of that smart experience. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, no, I appreciate that. And I guess part of me is like, well, our mission of creating that 5-star raving fan on every move doesn't really have anything to do with college, or brothers. Like, how important is that for that mission statement, the values your company has, like the little fun little things that you have? How is it important are those to tie into like the baseline brand, or can you have like a few of them that tie into the baseline brand, and then a few of them over here that don't really have anything to do with it, but that paint more of that picture?
Yeah, I mean, I think in your case, there are a lot of elements that can be derived from the name. So there's a lot of things that you can introduce in your social media voice, in how you speak about the experience that can sort of circle back to the name and what it actually signifies. And I think to your point, like when you think about the tagline and talking about how the tagline relates back to the experience you're hoping to deliver, it would be super cool if, even let's say you have three different tiers of services that you offer. And, instead of being gold, silver, and bronze, it was something related to, I'm just going to speak graduate, undergrad and something like that. Like, so you could
Freshman,
do some
yeah.
things, yeah, that are just more related to the brand name that again make that so much more unique to you and so much less generic. So I definitely think that there's brand story elements that can be taken from the name to make again everyone feel like the experience is different, because otherwise then why we called two college brothers? We could have been called again M&R moving. If I'm not leveraging the asset of the brand name in my channels, I'm missing that opportunity
Hmm,
to do
I like
something
that.
fun with it.
And does your agency help companies kind of come up with some of these things? Like what services does your agency provide? If we were to rebrand today and we just said, give us the big package,
Mhm.
the postgraduate doctorate juris doctorate package.
So yeah, I mean, we obviously do the brand development, we do naming, we do tagline, we do brand voice guidelines. So again, a lot of that stuff is covered in there. We do stuff with brand story as well. So the sort of the full suite of how that brand should live and breathe and speak, not only just with words but with optics,
Hmm.
is what we really do. So we do collateral, we do billboards, we do all those other things, but when we have the opportunity to do some of those things, I think those are the most powerful brands that really leverage the opportunity. So again, no, everyone's going to walk away with an amazing logo, an amazing truck wrap, and maybe business cards and uniforms. But there's so much more that can be done to leverage those optics, both in written form and then even other visuals that can come after that.
100%. And a lot of people think a brand is just a logo, but it's so much more than that. It's your culture, it's how you answer the phone,
Yeah.
it's the music people hear when they call into your phone. And it's how your guys show up and how they dress and how they act. And, Chick-fil-A, it's saying, you say thank you, they say my pleasure. Like that's part of their brand. And, I think getting somebody like you on your team that's an expert in this field that has helped hundreds of companies 10x their businesses through really fully understanding and developing a well-rounded brand is invaluable. I mean, look at what Tommy Mello's done since you rebranded him. He's on his way to become a billionaire. And he's, a big, I think, turning point from him was when he rebranded through
Yeah.
your agency.
Yeah.
And I like to just do whatever Tommy does, like because he's figured it out. He's like light years ahead of
And
anybody in this industry, as far as I know.
and the interesting thing about Tommy rebranding is Tommy rebranded at 30 or $40 million in revenue.
Wow.
And by all benchmarks, you would say, well, dude was crazy successful at 30 or $40 million in revenue. What makes him say, you know what, my brand isn't good, my brand isn't working, my brand could be better? And he really looked and saw, especially the biggest deficiency he had was really his vehicles and his truck wraps. They were awful, they were really bad. But he kept on saying, "Oh my god, like it's working. Like we got the 30 million." And it's hard to argue with that. Just say, "Well, that's a failure. We got the 30 million." But,
In Tommy's
Tommy's
mind, it
mindset
is.
is nothing is good enough today that we need to do for tomorrow, right? And he understood that where he wanted to go was going to be a much harder task to get there with sort of this obstacle, this impediment, that he had, which was his own brand. So we fixed that and we leveraged some aspects of his old brand into the new brand. And yeah, it was 3 years after rebranding, and I think he was over 200 million in revenue at that point. And certainly everything from culture to huge increases in average tickets, his booking rates, his close rates, and even his ad spend was really, really affected by that rebrand in a positive way. But he's a great example. And we've done some companies in that range. Like we just rebranded a company, Eco Plumbers, that was at 40 million or 42 million in revenue, and a year later they were at 60 after the rebrand. So that
Wow.
was pretty amazing results there also. And again, just another person who wasn't complacent, who didn't say, well, we're at 42 million, like obviously it's working, but it was more like, no, like we could be doing so much better if we actually got this dialed in. So there's a lot of people that are like that. And again, the interesting thing is you see some of the bigger companies become very complacent because again they have that measure of success and they're like, we don't really need to change, and they don't necessarily understand the other side of that equation. But I'm fortunate enough that like no one goes through the experience and at the end of the experience or 6 months after launching a rebrand says, we should have never done this. The number one thing that everyone says is, I wish we had done this sooner, because it would have been far less expensive even at that point too. It's less trucks to rewrap, it's less things to redo, right? So almost universally, that's the one thing that people say is, I wish I'd done this sooner. The other thing that they say, which is kind of interesting, is the effect of their mindset and what it does to them as an owner is really interesting to see, because there's just sort of this renewed passion, this renewed energy. Like they're super stoked to get the new swag. They see the employees get super excited about being a part of this and this vision that they have about where they want to take it. The employees see that it's not like a stale company that isn't interested in actually growing and expanding and making a better future for them. So it's funny because people don't usually come to us and say, Dan, listen, we want to rebrand because we want to improve our culture and I want to get renewed as an owner. But that's like what happens afterwards. And a lot of them are kind of surprised at how it's affected them and their mindset afterwards. And I think that that's a really cool thing to also experience and see firsthand how it really affects so many other things beyond the pretty trucks and the lowered marketing spend and all that other thing. Like, what does it do to the owner's psychology and their mindset? I think is really cool to see.
I love it. I've got so many more questions, but you're going to be at the Moving Titan retreat, putting on this workshop, getting people to walk through what is it, 10 questions,
Yeah.
rating their companies. And we're going to have an open discussion where companies can literally, in a safe space, I hate that word, but like literally like in a closed door setting
Yeah.
without all these external distractions and influences, critique each other and find out, what is working with my brand? What do I need to fix? Do I need to just scrap the whole thing and totally refresh it, or are there a few tweaks here and there?
Yeah.
You're going to be there leading that. You're going to have Tommy there right by your side, a bunch of other super, super smart business people. Really, really excited to get down to business and really
Yeah.
dive into not only our brand, but everybody else's and make something great. let's make moving great again
Yeah.
with branding. Or I don't know about again because I don't
The
know.
thing I got to say though is a lot of people come to my workshops and there's going to be so many inspirational speakers and they usually walk out of those meetings super inspired. Usually people after they leave mine walk out super depressed and really sad about why they've been spending so much money on marketing and it's not working and all these other things.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of depressed people that sometimes leave my workshops, but the beauty of it is we're going to give you a pathway to help you fix it if you need help with it. So
Better to learn now than in a couple years or 10 years from now when you've already spent a whole lot more money that you don't need to spend. So,
yep,
Dan, this is
absolutely.
great. How can people get in touch with you if they want to touch base before the retreat?
Sure. You could just hit me up at dan@kickcharge.com, or you could go to our website at kickcharge.com and, fill out a contact form. You could check out some of our work. And even if you never work with Kickcharge, but you want me to take a look at what you have going on and just give you some feedback on it, listen, I'm more than happy to do that. The trades have been amazing to me. Anything I can do to give back to help. Sometimes it's simple things like, hey, Dan, here's my truck wrap, what do you think? And I can just make some quick recommendations about things that maybe can be adjusted or fixed. So just, if I can help in any way, just let me know.
Absolutely. And if you don't think Dan's an expert by now at branding, go check out his book, Branded Not Blanded, because he truly is the best there is in the home services and just honestly in probably any business that I've seen. So, Dan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been another exciting episode with Dan Antonelli from Kickcharge Creative.
Thanks, Wade.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. If you would like to learn more about any of the sponsors listed on this show, want to apply for the next Moving Titan retreat, or interested in owning or working for a Two College Brothers franchise, drop me a line at wade@twocollegebrothers.com. Moving out. Have a great day.